being the November 15th CoSA web conference call. We have about maybe 10 or 15 minutes worth of announcements and notifications about different things, and then we're going to move into the primary focus of today's call, which is a review of the Archives and Records Management survey results from the survey we took. So to get through this, let's go ahead and start. You can see today's agenda in front of you, and I think the next slide is probably going to have the actual Advocacy and Awareness Summit information. I think we went to there. Thank you. Mm-hmm. CoSA is hosting the leadership of SAA, Nagara, and representatives from the National Archives on December 6th in Annapolis. And thank you, Tim Baker from the Maryland State Archives, for helping us coordinate some of this. After BPE ends, but before the CoSA board meets also in Annapolis, there's about a 4-hour block of time where we're going to be meeting with these people, talking about developing an advocacy and awareness agenda for the archives field as a whole. I understand that about 10 years ago there was a similar effort made, and so we're hoping that out of this comes some ideas for broad archival issues that need to be addressed, and that we can hopefully get some traction and have the community as a whole push to make some progress in. So if you would all think of things that maybe you think we should be addressing at that meeting, issues that may be out there, some of the things that we're currently talking about are electronic records, funding and resources, diversity is on there. There's a list of about 7 items, and maybe we can make that public to the CoSA group, Vicki, at some point. But if there's other things that you think are important for us to raise as issues, we would love to do that at this meeting. So that's the gist of this. And I should mention, don't forget, December 6th is Best Practices in Maryland. So, and we thank the Maryland State Archives for hosting. Let's go ahead and go to the next one. And on this, I think Ellen from New Jersey, is she on here? I think Joe was going to ask her to record.
Unmuted. Okay, Ellen, you should be unmuted. Can you hear us?
Yeah. You're live, Ellen. Do you want to give us a brief report on how things are going in New Jersey?
Yeah, hold on just a second.
Hi, this is Joe Klett.
Oh, Joe, you're there. Okay.
Well, I just got down from the meeting, and Ellen's yelling at me to get over here. So I'm going to give the report sitting at her desk because I couldn't get the audio to work on my desk.
Okay, Joe. Just so you know, you've got about 3 minutes.
Okay, I'll make it quick. Most of you know that back in July, the State Archives was split from Records Management. So that's sort of the context in which I'll start. By saying we have had some challenges in coordinating our response efforts, which was exacerbated by the fact that the Records Center was without power for the first week of the storm. So it wasn't really until the second week that we could really effectively coordinate. But during the first week, we did contact all of the county clerk's offices and got reports. In terms of county records, Essex County was the worst hit. They lost about 70% of the content of their records center, mostly non-permanent records. In fact, I think all non-permanent records. But we're still waiting for lots of reports we expect from the barrier islands, along the coast, where we still don't even know fully what has happened there. We've gotten a number of reports from Hudson County, Jersey City, Hoboken area, where they had severe flooding. But by the second week, we were able to coordinate with Records Management, and the records analysts were the ones that we were directing people to disseminate the contacts and the links and the technical information, and they've kept a log as well. The State Archives staff went to the National Guard's Militia Museum in Seagirt, which had 5 feet of water in its museum, completely devastated, really. And they had prepared for the potential flood at a 3-foot level, based on Irene last year when it did flood 1.5 feet, but unfortunately it flooded 5 feet, and they lost or had to freeze dry a lot and lost some. but we went down there and helped them evacuate all of the undamaged records for safe storage in the state archives until they're ready to deal with those. So that was one of the things that we were able to do, and also I encouraged the counties, particularly in Monmouth County and Cape May County, to offer that same service to the local governments, at least to hold their undamaged records safely for them while they were dealing with compromised buildings and facilities. But of course, we still don't know the extent of the damage in a lot of places. As Vicki knows, we're hoping to license the CoSA, David Carmichael's publications on the recovery of personal records and business records for distribution, at a nominal cost to New Jersey parties of interest. And I think that's mostly what I have to say.
Thanks, Joe. And are Chris or Kathleen on the phone from New York? Is there an update from New York?
I'm looking to see if Kathleen's on yet. I don't see her here. She was planning to come, and Chris is not going to be here.
Okay.
So I guess we move on.
Okay. Let's move forward.
Oops, sorry.
Georgia. Are we going to talk about Georgia at all, or is that part of Kathleen?
Yeah, it should be here.
It's one.
There it is. Yep, skipped one. And Kay should be here. Let me see.
I see her.
Need to unmute her.
Kay, you want to go ahead? You're unmuted.
Okay. Okay. Hello, everyone. The State Archives, as you probably know in Georgia, did not close November 1st. We have all of 5 employees. I think the first 2 weekends actually went fine, and they didn't have any rush of researchers, and generally our number of researchers sort of slack off this time of the year anyway. Plans are proceeding, working with the legislature and the governor's office, that we will be moved, that State Archives will be moved under the Board of Regents starting July 1st. That will be pending the approval of the state legislature, and the legislature meets starting in mid-January. There's been a little bit of debate whether we think this move is a good thing. We think it's a good move for several reasons. One, there's some natural ties between State Archives and the Board of Regents just in terms of collections and preservation concerns and such. Also, State Archives is located right next to Clayton State University campus and made extensive use of their interns and such from campus. But also, the Secretary of State's office wanted to close State Archives down. So we have no great affection for him and no great desire to stay there. And the governor's office was who suggested moving to the Board of Regents. So between now and next April, we'll be looking to see what the legislation says about moving the State Archives. We do think there's a task force being formed that has the president of Clayton State University as its chair, and we hope that there will be some of us as members of the task force, so that we can see what's happening with the archives and the records management office as well. So things are proceeding. The Friends of Georgia Archivists hired a government affairs consultant / lobbyist. We think that's been a good move. He's got some great connections, and already been talking to the chair of the Board of Regents. We do appreciate FOGA and various members made a generous donation to that fund, and we appreciate that as we appreciate everybody's support. So I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Kay, and good continued success. And I hope that the university is very supportive of the efforts of the archives there, so good luck with that.
Yeah, early indications are that they are, but we'll be watching for that.
Okay. Thank you.
If there are questions, they need to go into chat because people can't speak on the phone.
Okay, let's go ahead and move to the next slide. We should mention that CoSA members have contributed over $1,000 to the Friends of the State of the Georgia Archives and History program to help support their cause, so we all appreciate those efforts. Next is Siri, and Matt Veach is chairing this, well, he is co-chairing the Siri committee. Matt, do you want to talk about this?
Yes, I would be happy to talk about this. Siri, as you all know and have heard about, is CoSA's a major initiative sponsored by CoSA to enhance the management of electronic records and the preservation of electronic records in our 50 state archives and the District of Columbia and the Black Territories. We have a number of different areas in which we are working. We've divided up into 4 subcommittees, and there's an education subcommittee, an awareness subcommittee, a governance subcommittee, and a best practices and tools subcommittee. The education subcommittee is the one that is most active, I guess, right now. We're all active, but the education subcommittee has a very large grant project that they are engaging in right now. And I believe we're going to have reports from each of the subcommittees as the major part of the Siri report here. So I will turn it over to, I believe Sarah Kuntz is going to be reporting on the education subcommittee activities. Sarah?
Yes, I'm here. Very briefly, I'll give you an update from the Education Subcommittee. I believe everyone is aware that we're working with that IMLS grant that covers educational initiatives, and the 2 big pieces of that include the $1,000 of training money that is available to each state and territory throughout the period of the grant, and then the institutes that will be the week-long intensive institutes on electronic records management and preservation. At last month's webinar, I announced that the scholarship application forms were ready if you were wanting to use some of your Siri scholarship money for the best practices exchange that's coming up. We've had several applications already turned in. If you want those forms just for BPE, let me know. Otherwise, we anticipate that they'll be posted on the CoSA website very shortly for use with any other training opportunities. And we do encourage you to be looking broadly at something that would really benefit your staff. And that might include, a Nagara e-records forum or BPE next year or a webinar. There's lots of possibilities and choices. So if you have any questions about that or you need a copy of the forms for this year's BPE, please let me know. The other piece to that, the institutes, for those of you that missed it, I sent out an email to the CoSA listserv detailing our desire to just sort of test the waters and see who might be interested in helping host one of the institutes. The schedule in the grant calls for there to be a basic institute in 2013, and that would be for the 24 states and territories with the most basic of the electronic records management programs as identified in the self-assessment survey that we've recently completed. And then everyone will be able to send someone to an advanced institute. There will be 1 a year of those, one in 2013 and then 2014 and 2015. So if you feel like you have facilities to host in a classroom setting, can help us with a little bit of the cost share, with staff time for local arrangements, let me know, because we'd like to see who has that capability before we start narrowing down where we're going to actually hold the institutes. And the last thing I would say is that by way of the institutes, Beth Shields and I, who are chairing up the Education Subcommittee group, we're having a session at BPE, so if you're going to be there, we encourage you to come to our session and do a little bit of sharing with us. We're going to sort of run it like a incubator session, and it's going to be about the institutes. What do we need to have in these week-long institutes at the basic and advanced levels? So we're interested in hearing from you. What are you most keen to see as on the training agenda? So please, we encourage you, if you're going to be in Maryland, to come to our session. And that's the Education Committee report. Please feel free to contact us if you have any questions. I'm not sure who's next.
Can you hear Julia?
We can. I can.
Go ahead, Julia.
Okay, great. This is Julia Young, and I'm going to report briefly on the Awareness Committee. From the Awareness Committee, we also will have a session at BPE on advocacy, run similarly to an incubator session. So we also encourage people to come and talk to us about what initiatives they have pursued in terms of advocacy for electronic records and what has been successful and what has not been successful. One thing I will say, the slide says that a reporter is coming. We are trying to arrange for a reporter to come. We're going to invite an AP reporter to come so that we can get some press coverage for BPE, and also to try to provide an opportunity for him to learn more about the needs of state archives and electronic records. The committee is also gathering information on the strategies that states have used that they have found useful. We'll have some questions going out to the membership, and also we're going back through the interviews that were conducted back in 2011 to get this information. We are working to develop a tool which states can use to identify to whom they need to advocate immediately and who their more long-term partners and allies might be as they build their electronic records programs. And then finally, we hope to have a webinar in February or March on advocating for electronic records. So that's pretty much where the committee is headed now. And if any of you would like to get involved with this, please let me know, because we would love to have some more members.
This is Vicki. I'm going to spring something on you. I didn't tell the rest of the group this was coming, but I've set up a poll for it to ask all of you to tell us if you're coming to BPE or not. As long as 2 of these committees will be active there, I thought it'd be interesting to let them know how many of their colleagues might be in attendance.
Great. Thanks, Vicki.
Mm-hmm.
Is everybody seeing the poll? It's showed up there as a blue screen, and we want you to enter.
More than half of them. We've got 2/3 of you have voted so far.
Okay.
So 70% now. 72. %. Well, you guys are good. Still coming.
Well, since we don't have organizers voting, then probably not to get 100%.
Okay. Becky, do you remember how to show the poll, the results of the poll? That would be a good thing. Or can you see it on your screen? See, I can't see what you're seeing. Well, let's see what happens when I close it. Okay. Well, it's sharing polling results.
Now it's showing.
Now it's showing. Good. Okay. Go on. Sorry about that, Jim. Or Matt.
Matt, do you recall who's going to speak about the governance committee?
Yeah, I'm unmuted now. I see Sean Rounds on my list here. Sean is muted at the moment. Could we unmute her and let her report on the governance committee? Sean, are you there? Okay, I'm not hearing Sean. The governance committee is they're kind of getting organized right now. They're focusing on issues that primarily relate to how state archives and records management programs can become more actively involved in information governance and information technology governance in their states. And the governance committee has started by just trying to define what we mean by information governance or perhaps even data governance. And they've had a very active discussion on their Basecamp site about that. They have the governance committee has struggled just a little bit to get full participation. They've got they've got several of their members that are on more than one subcommittee, and so they wanted me to ask, or just kind of put out an open call for participation among CoSA members, CoSA stakeholders in the activities of the governance committee. It's a very important one. It's one that really kind of gets at how do archives and records management programs become major players or more significant players in establishing policies, perhaps get involved in procurement decisions for new IT systems, or a lot of different areas in which archives and records management need to be more actively involved in state government. And so they're looking for models, they're looking for different ways that states have accomplished that, but they are looking for additional members to help them carry out their work. The liaisons for the governance committee are Tanya Marshall and Mary Beth Herkert. Tanya Marshall from Vermont and Mary Beth Herkert from Oregon, and the chair of the committee is Sean Rounds from Minnesota. So I would encourage any of you who are interested in those ideas, kind of larger policy ideas on how we can make electronic records management and digital preservation kind of a more fundamental part of the information policy decisions made in state government. I would encourage you to get involved in the governance committee. And then finally, the best practices and tools subcommittee is one in which I'm one of the liaisons to that. It's chaired by Marty Gingenbach from Kansas, our new electronic records archivist here in Kansas, and it's co-chaired by his co-chair is Matthew Glover from the staff in Mississippi on Julia's staff. And they have divided up the work. It's a very active committee, a fairly large committee, and it's looking at just trying to identify best practices and standards and tools kind of in the larger digital preservation and electronic records management community, analyze those best practices and tools from the perspective of state archives, perhaps vet them, even annotate them, kind of give guidance on which ones state archives should pay most attention to. So that's kind of one part of the work, and so there's one working group kind of focused on the tools themselves, and then there's another working group that is looking specifically at what has worked, what initiatives exist in current state settings, state archives and records management program settings that seem to have worked pretty well, and at least include those in a nice one-stop shop kind of web-based clearinghouse for folks. So that subcommittee has been very active. It's having monthly calls of the entire committee and more frequent calls of the working groups. And so look over the course of the next few months for some of the reports to come out from the best practices and tools group. So I think that does it for Siri. Unless people have questions, I'll turn it back over to you, Jim.
Thank you, Matt. The next thing we want to talk about is the executive transition. As many of you know, I suspect all of you know, Vicki's retiring on December 3rd. So Anne will be starting January 1st. And we want to let you all know that those of you that are at the Best Practices Exchange, she will be there, I'm sure on Thursday, and maybe slightly before then, in Annapolis. So you'll have a chance to meet her if you're at BPE. And of course, she'll be in New Orleans this summer. The main operations for CoSA will move from Vicki's home to New York State. The Archives building, the State Archives in New York, has offered us some space to house the CoSA office, so we've taken them up on that. Jennifer and Becky will continue to be contract employees with CoSA, working from their homes in Missouri and Iowa. And Vicki has already begun diligently, with the assistance of both Jennifer and Becky, boxing up, or really they were already boxed, but moving and shipping all of CoSA's records to New York and to our archival repository, the North Carolina State Archives. So we've been busy behind the scenes here. And when we have the addresses and the contact information, we'll post that once it's available for the new CoSA office. Okay. On the 2013 annual meeting, I just alluded to, in New Orleans this August, the 14th through 17th. Nancy Lanoil has done a great job as one of the co-chairs for the program committee, and serving with her are Beth Shields and Bonnie Weddle from CoSA as representatives on the committee. I understand that all of the CoSA proposals have been accepted, I think, but I'm sure you'll get some kind of official notification if you happen to have submitted something that will give you more detail. It should be a great conference, and Julia has promised no hurricanes and great weather, so we're happy to hear that. Thank you.
Anytime.
Right. We are expecting the CoSA work session to be Wednesday, the 14th of August, and the business meeting on probably Friday, but possibly Thursday, the 15th or 16th of August. So watch for more details as those develop. And for those of you that plan way ahead, 2014, all three organizations, Nagara, CoSA, and SA, will all be together in Washington, D.C. at the Boardman Park Marriott. Let's hit it. Next slide, please. And something the board's been working on is developing an awards program to recognize the significant achievements that a lot of the states are doing in different areas and this related to state archives and records management programs. And so Julia Young and Barbara Teague are co-chairing an awards program, and we expect to announce and hand out some additional awards. We of course have the Kathleen Rowe Advocacy Award, but we will be adding to our awards celebrations at the New Orleans conference. And I think we're talking about things like innovative program, most innovative program, best marketing effort for Archives Month, things along those lines, to provide some recognition for the work that all of you are doing that largely and often, too often, goes unrecognized. So I appreciate Julia and Barbara stepping up to help us there. Next, please. And now, Vicki, you're on.
I just wanted to make sure that you had the CDs and knew what to do with them to distribute them. We're starting to get a series of inquiries from students, and we're not sure where they are, so maybe they're using the CDs that you're distributing. We will, within the next few weeks, have extra jackets for sale, so that you can keep them looking spiffy if you make your own copies. So I just wanted to do that as a little reminder.
And I think, Vicki, you're on again.
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Yes. You didn't see the question, but Karen Wojcik asked that we please remind all of the CoSA members that are on the call that it's not too late to submit a session proposal for Nagara.
Oh, absolutely.
For Indianapolis.
Yes, in July, Nagara is hosting their annual meeting in Indianapolis this year. And thank you, Karen, for reminding all of us. If you'd like to submit a proposal, Karen chairs the program committee for the Nagara conference. So please send those to her attention in Michigan. Vicki, you want to go ahead and start with the Archives and Records Management Survey?
Okay. I will try to keep this sort of interesting. There's nothing like statistics to put everybody to sleep. But I think that there's enough in here that once you get your teeth into them, you'll find them interesting. I'm just going to give you a very high-flying view of what I've seen so far. I'm still working my way through the data, and by evidence of that is the supplement that I posted this morning that corrected some of the tables I sent you yesterday and added some additional ones as I found more things to crunch and move around. I want to reinforce that in the final report will be more than just tables. There will be a front end that will have some narrative and textual text that analyzes and puts some of the data in context. Right now, because this data is still not verified and reviewed by all of you, I'd ask that you not circulate it. Please don't take it even to your bosses. Keep it within the group for now, but make sure that you get any corrections. So look at your data hard and make sure you get any corrections back to me. Within, what did I say? I think I gave you until the 27th of November or 28th of November, so that we have time to get it wrapped up. It will feed into the Importance of State Archives document. And Jim, I'll give you a heads up now. When I run through this, I didn't make a slide for that, but if you'd like to put that in context at the end of this data stuff and have people thinking about that and give them a heads up on what we're doing, there's your 5 minutes to get ready. Actually, more like 20 probably. At any rate, I also want to reinforce, and you're actually going to see this slide twice, once now at the beginning of this presentation and another at the end. We really, really, really need to know how much time you've spent both on submitting your survey, compiling and submitting your data. You can count time you spent attending this webinar today towards your cost share. This is all cost share for our grant from NHPRC that is funding the survey and also funding the digital preservation capability self-assessment that you've taken. Becky has been, I know, sending out reminders for you to send in your cost share reports for those, or time sheets for those. You can include your survey time as well. And we've committed $87,000 worth of cost share. So we have a steep hill to climb. And obviously you've put in a lot of time already. We just need to document it now. So pay attention to that. And I also just ask you for submitting corrections to the report. I've had them come in a number of ways. If you just find 2 or 3 items, just put them in an email and send it to me, and I'll keep track of it that way. Somebody else, I had one of the records managers who I hadn't connected with before yesterday. She just typed it right into the document, the big long 130-pager, and send it in. If you want to do it that way, probably the best thing to do is track changes in Microsoft Word. Then I'll be able to find everything that you've put in there easily. So you're free to do it either way. It's my problem to keep track of the paperwork on this end, and I'll do my best. I may also be coming, I know we'll be coming back to you all one more time. There are a number of questions that the CIRI committees have identified that they'd like to ask, and there are a few more things now that I've been working my way through the data that I want to know that I didn't ask the first time. So there will be, I promise, a very short but necessary survey probably early next week. So it might even be something that you can do before Thanksgiving before you leave for Thanksgiving, or right when you get back, that last week in November. I don't think it'll be hard to answer. It just will be something that will help us a lot in figuring out where we're going. So as we were saying as you were logging in, but if you came in close to the time we started, there is the 130-pager or so long form of the draft review, the review draft version of this report or these tables, and then there's also a supplemental document both on Basecamp. It's actually in 2 different places on Basecamp. One in the ARM surveys section and one in the in the web conference section. So you can find it either way. If you've had a chance to download them, I've tried to include on the slides that I've developed for this which table they're in. So for instance, this first financial trends is based on the information in table 1.2. That's in the big document. As I said, I just wanted to kind of highlight some things in each case. So if you look at the detailed data, often state-by-state reports, in the big report, what this does is summarize some of the information in those reports or in those tables. The financial data is always one of the most problematic. Every time we have trouble comparing it because it's not always apples to apples and oranges to oranges. In addition, while this year we had a terrific response rate, we heard from every state archives and most of the records management programs that aren't also part of a state combined program. And so we had perhaps the best return rate ever. We heard from 4 of the 5 territories, which has never happened before. And we heard from the District of Columbia. So this was a very engaged group. It's not so much in previous years. It's been more spotty. Some were better than others. What I'm going to do for the financial data is try to go back into the earlier years and make some estimates based on the surrounding years of where those numbers might have been, so that these comparisons are better. What I can say is that archives, the state government expenditures dropped a lot starting around 2006. You'll see the same pattern echoed in the staffing levels. I was surprised to see that archives and records management expenditures, based on our statistics, did not drop as much. But my guess is because we didn't have complete data for the earlier years, the 2004, 2006, 2008, to compare to 2010. So while it went down according to the numbers I have, 48% for all state agencies, it only went down 22% for archives and records management. On the other hand, look at the final column. It started to swing back up for state governments as a whole, but it's still dropping for state archives. So that's why I put the caution on there. Take these with a grain of salt and stay tuned. I hope we'll have better information here. Some of the others, the other data fields, the holdings and the staffing, I'm a little more comfortable and confident about. We do see a continued increase in holdings. That's no surprise to any of us. What is breathtaking in a way is the increase per year and the acceleration of the amount of, this is of course non-electronic, so anything that's paper-based, microfilm, anything that's not digital is going up in an astounding rate now of 125,000 feet per year. In the mid-90s to the mid-2000s, it was only 58,000. So the rate has nearly doubled, or more than doubled, since 10 years ago. And that's just, anyway, I don't even know what more to say. In terms of the sources of records, most of it, this is again one of those kind of interesting things in terms of telling you about each other. Not so much meaningful for anybody outside necessarily, but this is again how close can you focus? Many of the state historical societies that also serve as the state archives have some difficulty segregating what specifically their state and local and non-government records from each other. So it's harder to come up with these figures. And if it's a state archives that is only a state archives, it's much easier to focus and say I'm reporting just for the state archives. So the non-government records, it fluctuates the percentage of those, but I believe that 8% is lower than it used to be, but it all depends on one year to the next on who's reporting and how they're reporting. In terms of the staffing trends, let me find my notes here. The size of the state archives, again, no surprise, varies a lot. From 100 in the combined programs in Maryland, their archives is substantial, and their records management program pretty small by comparison, but combined they have 100 employees. New Jersey had 91.5, but that was before the breakup, and I don't know how that the split between into separate archives and records management programs. I don't know how that personnel breakdown is going to work out. That'll be for the next survey to figure out. On the other hand, you've got Minnesota with just 3.5 FTEs assigned to the archives function, and Iowa and New Hampshire, very small, and it goes from there. This is, again, where I'm sure you're going to want to go to the table in the report and see where you fit in this bigger picture. Overall, significantly, we're continuing to lose staff. There was a big jump from between 94 and 2004. A lot of hiring then, more than doubled, but then it slowly, and sometimes not so slowly, dropped from there. This is one of the ones that's based on one of the supplemental tables. I compared the number of archives and records management FTEs to all state FTEs, and there were 28 per state for an average of 28 FTEs in the archives and records management programs. But with the 87,000 plus in all state governments. But that comes down to 4,280 state FTEs for every archivist or records manager available to support them. You can take a look in that supplemental table number 1 and see where you fit. This is archive staff relative to the holdings. There was a calculation that Paul Conway developed many years ago in analyzing or assessing archival programs of any kind that he called the intensity of care. And it came down to essentially dividing the total volume of records held in the repository by the number of people available to care for them. And government records repositories were always way more records per FTE than any other type of repository. But this is this figure is only getting more extreme. When you remember in that earlier table, New Hampshire had 3.5 people. They've got 36,000 plus linear feet of records to deal with, each one of those folks. When I was titling these two breakouts, the two boxes at the bottom of this particular screen, I was struggling with how I didn't want to say in the best shape and in the worst shape, and I didn't want to imply that even in West Virginia, 1,200 linear feet per FTE was a good thing. That's still a lot of material. So I chose to call that better balanced. But clearly the ones at the other end are not so balanced and significantly challenged. And again, that's there are tables relative to holdings, tables 1.6 and 2.3, and then I believe there's a table in the supplemental one that actually shows the rankings. Yeah, supplemental table number 2, and that supplemental will show you where your state ranks in that ratio. In terms of electronic records, this again shows the tremendous growth. None of us have been surprised at that either. I think the encouraging thing is the number of states that have not yet brought in any electronic records has dropped by nearly half in just the 2 years since the SIRI project got going. So there's clearly a willingness and understanding that this is an important thing to do, and it's a place where you've put in some effort. It's still going up, and I think will continue to go up. I don't have a recent figure for the number of terabytes at the National Archives, but the state archives, up until the last time I looked, were ahead of the National Archives as a whole. Your collective holdings was ahead of NARA, sometimes by a significant amount. So that is one of the things that I will check on when we do the final analysis. Staffing for electronic records, I thought this was interesting. Again, seeing a significant growth between 2010 and 2012 in the number of FTEs devoted to electronic records. This doesn't necessarily mean that you've got individuals who do nothing but electronic records. In many cases, there's divisions, more than one, a person will do more than one thing, and electronic records will be part of that. And I do apologize, in that review draft, this was the first table I ran into that was completely messed up in the main version of the review document. So please look at the supplemental table for the proper information here. In terms of state record center holdings, I thought this was interesting in some of the patterns that it shows. If you look at 2006, the bottom line on 2006 and 2012, a little more than 6 million in 2006 and 6.2 million in 2012. That's not a huge difference. There's an interesting dip between the two in 2010. I can't really explain that. And I have to caution you that not all state records management programs responded, so I'm not sure that this is an absolute total yet. And the same thing with earlier years. We didn't necessarily have a complete number. But look at what's happened. I thought the most interesting thing was what has happened to records that are not from state agencies and how that's gone down, especially the non-government records. There's hardly any non-government records left in state record centers. That has to be a reflection of the challenges, the economic challenges in state government, saying we just have to take care of our own. We can't do it, can't take in other materials. I'd be very interested if any of you who are active with the record centers, to hear your opinions of what this trend means, what these numbers really mean, and if I'm on target or not with that assessment of what I see here. I also was interested to see the larger volume of security microfilm. We hadn't asked about security microfilm in record centers in the earlier surveys, and we didn't start asking until 2010. So again, I haven't had a chance to look. Did the 2010 just not have the reports, or is there really a growth there? So if anybody would like to write to me or just shoot me an email offline reflecting on that, those patterns in the record centers, I'd really appreciate it. In terms of access and use, there's some frustration here for me. The regular, I call it person-to-person contacts, mail, whether it's surface mail or email, or an in-person visit or a telephone call. You can also kind of think about that as the way we used to do business, or still do. But the more traditional forms of contacting a state archives or any kind of archival repositories, that number dipped in 2010. It came back a little in 2012, the total number. You can see that mail is becoming, is dropping, the total volume of mail. Actually, all three of these categories are declining. What I'm assuming is happening is that more stuff is coming in from the web. But the website statistics that we were able to collect and that you were able to provide are not showing that activity. This is a unique visitors. Is that really right? Now I can't read, or is that the total hits? I think this is unique visitors, but I was doing this morning, and I may have gotten that label wrong. That we were showing 216 million, and now we're at 31 million, and we're seeing. It just doesn't make sense to me. I think it's that you all don't have access to the kinds of data that we need here, and you might remember that we had a session in 2 years ago when we were in Tennessee on how to count electronic records, which included, to my mind, website use. And we had a wonderful discussion but didn't come to any conclusions. If we're going to demonstrate what state archives do and how they do it now and the value of online access to your materials, we're going to have to come up with a way to count these better so that we have some real figures that really mean something. and can show what you do every day. So there's my current frustration. And again, if you've got ideas on how this could be done in a different way, or a supplemental question we could ask next week that would get at some of these numbers in a different way, that would be really helpful. We did ask this year, and I haven't had a chance to even read them in any depth, but we did ask for other ways that you're providing reference services. And I did see in there are a number of other things that you all talked about. And in analyzing that, we may come up with some other ways of assessing or describing how reference is done in 2012. And that may help. So any ideas, I'll be glad to hear them. There's a full section in the survey, you may remember, on local government record services. The last time we asked these questions was in 2006 as part of our local government project. This was kind of a way to check in and see, is the picture still the same? I have not yet had a chance to look at these numbers relative to the numbers from 2006, but I was interested to see several things in here. The most active areas you all are involved with, there are still nearly half of the state archives have an active program for actually serving as a repository for local government records. And even more significantly, most of you are approving schedules. Many, 2/3 are actively writing or assisting local governments in writing their schedules. And even more so, you're providing a lot of training to local governments. That was the place that the fewest of you said you never did it. That one of the ideas for moving forward with CoSA that Ann Ackerson has already talked about is the idea of using some of the materials we already have in hand to provide additional training for other groups. And I think that training for local governments and assisting you in helping you do that will be something to watch for. And we've got such wonderful materials that we've developed over the years in all of our projects. To be able to then mine them for providing additional training would be a really wonderful thing. And since you're already doing a lot of it, I think that that's a nice support of what you're doing and support for what CoSA would like to do. At the end, I should say, there was also an emergency preparedness section. I haven't even opened it yet. Well, I did. I looked at it briefly, but the data was so long and complex, I haven't had a chance. I also, in the next 6 weeks, have to write the final report on the IPER project. So I will be using a lot of that data in doing that report, and certainly will share it with all of you. The final section of the survey, you'll remember, asked you to identify first any initiatives that you have planned for the next few years, 2-3 years. And I haven't had a chance to work on categorizing those, but I did go through the issues that you identified, and they split in and then grouped them by kind of overall topic. Again, no surprise, electronic records and digitization's right there at the top. It has been for as long as I can remember. I'd say back through all of the surveys to 2004. Funding is a major issue, and staffing. The staffing includes not just we're losing staff or we need staff, but issues like transition and knowledge transfer as staff retires, and that's obviously kind of a sensitive issue for me right now as I get ready to pass along what I can. I kind of feel like I'm doing that with this last survey report. Facilities was another issue. There was a concern about facilities that were full or not well maintained or difficult or expensive to keep up, or just in many cases just lack of space. Buildings that were full. Other things, the longer version of the report, I grouped these together so that you could see everybody's comments that fell under each one of these topics, so that you could kind of get a better feel to be able to read them together. One of the other products that I'm planning to pull out of this data and some of the other resources we already have is a State Archives and Records Management quick reference. These are basically, it's a way to put all in one place on the web, I'm assuming, and it responses to all of the questions that I get calls on regularly. One is, when were the programs established and what's the authorizing legislation? When a reporter calls, like for the Georgia State Archives situation, that was the first thing they wanted to know, was how old is this program, and are there any other programs like it? And so I was looking through Ernst Posner, for those of you who've got a copy of Posner around your office someplace, and trying to find, again, and I did have a table from one of our earlier surveys that finally surfaced, and so I thought, well, we'll pull that back out again, make sure that that's more readily available. Or the organizational placement within state government is on our website, has been for a long time, and is probably one of the hardest things to find on our website. It's just, we do finally, I think, have a link on the page where we have the directory or the links to all of the State Archives websites, but it's not one of those things intuitively you know where on our site to go look. So I figure if this is, I'm thinking of this kind of like an almanac or an FAQ or something along those lines. So we'll see how that goes. Also, they want to know about the joint versus split archives and records management programs. Who's got them joint? Who's been split? When were they split? Why did they merge? If they merged recently, those kinds of things. But this at least will identify which ones are joint, which ones were split, and if we can figure out how to do it pretty easily, put down the timing for that. So what year did the merger or the split happen? And then finally, information about buildings. And this may be one of the short questions that I come back to you all on. Several years ago, I think it was the 2004 or 2006 survey, we did ask you to tell us when your building was built, how many feet of storage capacity did you have, how full were you, did you have, what kinds of temperature and humidity controls, those kinds of things did you have in place? And we may resurrect some of those questions, because those are the kinds of things that when one of you has a new building project coming on, you need to know, and you want to look for another state that has a comparable situation, comparable size of holdings, that kind of thing. So it would be just handy to have that available. Here's that slide again about reporting your time and submitting your corrections to the report. Again, I'd be happy to have the latter in either an email or track changes document. I appreciate all the time and effort that you've put in on the survey. Like I said, I just was ecstatic to have 100% reporting from the states and nearly that from the territories. It's a first and something to be proud of. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Vicki. A couple things to cover here. One is, before we get to this last slide,
okay.
Tim Baker wanted me to remind all of you that it is not too late to sign up for the BPE registration. It's still open, so if you'd like to be coming to that incredible meeting in Annapolis, Maryland, where you'll have a chance to meet Ann Ackerson and say, well, one of our goodbye opportunities for Vicki, head to Annapolis. And then the other thing is, Vicki, you talked about the importance of State Archives document.
Right.
And I was supposed to ask them about?
Well, just tell them what we're doing.
What we're doing? Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't write a full note. I just wrote those words, and I couldn't remember the rest of it. So it's part of our efforts to provide some advocacy materials or awareness materials about what the State Archives are doing. For the last couple of years, the board's been working with a committee to develop a what appears to be an 8-page booklet that will talk about what State Archives generally do. We'll have some statistics in here, and we're working to try and make it a positive piece that lays out the case for why State Archives are important to government. We're kind of soft selling it for the use of the state legislature so that you can provide this to the state legislature, legislators really. We're looking at probably trying to get enough so that you'll have one for each of your SHREB members, one for each of your legislators, and then a few extras on top of that. And So we've been working on that project, and we have some grant funds to help pay for it. So look for that. I think it should be out right around January of 2013. Is there anything else I should talk about on that, Vicki?
No,
or
I
anything
think
you want to
that's
add?
pretty much it. Yeah, we'll probably have a chance to it will be in further along by this next one, this year-end wrap-up, and we probably will be able to fill you in some more then.
Yeah.
It dovetails nicely with the advocacy update or advocacy work we're doing with the other associations and NARA too.
And another announcement is that in February we'll be having a webinar. I'm skipping all over the place here, for the Shrab Town Hall, our second Shrab Town Hall, and we also will be announcing before then something called the Shrab Commons, which will be an opportunity for the Shrabs to communicate. Members of the Shrabs have a place to look at NHPRC information, like the things that Dan Stokes has provided from NHPRC, where he talks about some of the programs that the different state Shrabs are funding through the grants. And so we're going to try and provide more communication to the Shrab members. And then next month, we have the year-end wrap-up, and in January we'll have this advocacy and awareness program. So we hope you'll attend all of those as well. Vicki, you want to say anything else?
No, I will say that actually, although we haven't told you, Becky's been communicating with many. The Shrab Commons actually already exists as a base camp section, and I think Becky has signed everybody up, or most everybody who attended the first Shrab Town Hall. Right now, Dan Stokes' document is there from that conference, and I believe the other materials from that meeting. But we don't have a lot there yet. Eventually, it'll have the Shrab orientation manual and some of those other kinds of materials as a starter. But it should be I hope it'll grow into an active and lively place. So.
Well, with that, we hope to see many of you in Maryland at the best practices, and we certainly would expect to see you or hear from you on the 13th at the next conference webinar. And thank you all so much, and enjoy your Thanksgivings. Thanks today.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.